Is belief plus action enough to really develop the growth mindset? Or do you need more? And if you need more, what is it? We believe growth plus action is important, but it has to be done so within the context of the right learning environment. You have to create the right environment where that belief and action can be realized in a positive way if you really want to have a growth mindset. Welcome to another session of a learner's mindset discussion. I'm Dr. Dwayne Hrapnick, and my colleague here is.
Dr. Talissa Thibodeau.
Today, we're going to be exploring the growth mindset. Well, actually, we're going to be talking about how do you develop the growth mindset, or how do you grow a growth mindset? And in that discussion, I think we're going to be discussing or exploring some of the videos that you will see out there. If you type growth mindset into YouTube or into a Google search, you're going to get dozens or hundreds of thousands, millions of hits. It's a very popular topic, and everybody is an expert on developing and growing a growth mindset. And I think a lot of them mean well, and they have a lot of really positive and good intentions, but I think they're missing some key ideas. And if you were to take a look at the research and actually look at Carol Dweck's responses to some of the hoopla over the growth mindset, she would argue that the growth mindset really isn't about making kids feel good. It isn't about developing self-esteem. It isn't the latest just say no to drugs. It isn't the latest power of a positive mental attitude. It really is a philosophy. It is a mindset. It is something that you develop over time. And today I think we'd like to explore, how do you really develop and grow a growth mindset? What is involved? And we're going to address some of the hype that is out there that I think we need to address. And we'll also explore some of our responses from our students in our courses in terms of how they feel about this. So this is a bit of a long intro. We're looking at a lot of things. The growth mindset. What are your thoughts, Dr. Thibodeau?
I love discussing the growth mindset because it's really important we take an intricate look into what some of the hype is. Because I find that it's so easy to fall into that trap of just trying to motivate students. And in doing so, we hoping that they'll believe they can, innovate and achieve everything in the world. Well, those are good intentions. We do have to step back and take a look very specifically at what our kids and our teachers think about learning first. So, and their own learning experience and the learning experience that the kids have each day in classrooms, or adult learning for that matter. So I think we have to take it back to what folks believe, and what they believe about learning. And that's, I think, a key place we might want to start in disentangling some of the hype.
So what do people believe about learning? Interesting starting point. I want to relay a story, or not a story, but an experience that happened to me earlier on this week. Met with my grad students. You and I are, for our new listeners, you and I have developed a Master's of Digital Learning and Leading at Lamar University, and we coach and guide and mentor dozens, hundreds of graduate students and help them to become digital learners and leaders. And in one of the meetings I had in my class on creating significant learning environments, my learning theory class, we were talking about the growth mindset. This week's assignment, or this week's component of what they're looking at, we were asking students, or I was asking students, to reflect on their ideas and reflect on their experience with a growth mindset. Just to provide a context, in our first course in our program, we have our students explore Carol Dweck's book. They read it, they look at it, they take a look at her supporting resources, they take a look at a variety of videos that are out there, they take a look at the growth mindset, and we ask them in that first course to develop some sort of a plan. How we ask them, how would you implement the growth mindset in your learning environment? And it's interesting to see what we get. And quite often, a lot of these students have never heard of the growth mindset, or if they have, they've sort of associated with that self-esteem movement, or the putting up a bunch of posters and encouraging kids to think positively and to recognize that they can grow, and they use terms like neuroplasticity, and the brain can grow, and the brain is a muscle, and all you need to do is work it out a little bit. So they print off posters, they put posters up. So in their plans, they barrage students with these ideas, and then we see what happens. In this course, our students are 3, 4, sometimes 5 courses into the program, 4 or 5 courses into the program, and we're asking them to revisit the growth mindset. How's it working? Is it working? What's happening? Well, this was interesting. This was interesting. Before I explain what happened with this group of students, did you want to add anything about the growth mindset in 5302, which is one of the courses that you are responsible for, being the primary instructor on? Did you want to just touch on that?
Yeah, I was thinking that while you were talking, actually. Students do begin the digital learning and leading program in the first course, and the very first work that they start pulling together are their ideas on the growth mindset. And they talk about, the 4 steps of changing your mindset, which, include listening to your fixed mindset voice, taking action. And these are very raw, rudimentary ideas that they put together in terms of their plan and moving forward. Sometimes they have a little bit of a disconnect in terms of, does this apply to me or to my students? And really, because we're so geared around authentic learning experiences, we want them to consider how they'll build a growth mindset for their progress in the program, but how will they model that with their students? So it's really important that they might get the initial ideas where students tend to just define fixed mindset versus growth mindset. We want to get them thinking deeper in terms of what the growth mindset actually entails, and how do they move that to a learner's mindset. So you're actually revisiting this initial plan in this course that you're talking about. So again, it's very raw at that point, and many folks are really just sort of explicating what the growth mindset means. And it's great to revisit this so after time they can think deeply about what they've built and reflect upon that, and how that maybe they too have embraced some of the false mindset issues that have come up in some of the research and articles we've read.
Yeah, so you've touched on some really good points. There are sort of 4 key steps, or I would actually even reduce it to 2. Recognizing your growth mindset voice, and recognizing, sorry, not your growth mindset, your fixed mindset voice, recognizing that we often think, well, I'm not a math person, I'm not an artist, I'm not this, I'm not that. So we hit ourselves. Recognize that we do that, and then shift that thinking by adding the notion of yet. Well, I can't do that yet. Right, and those are the 2 key fundamental steps that Dweck talks about. Then there are a couple other steps you had mentioned, but we're not going to go into that in that great detail. Other than to say that the growth mindset is really shifting that perspective. Right, the fixed mindset is based on you know the last 100 years of scientific research on talent and a variety of other things. That what you're born with is what you got. Right, that is what you've got, and that isn't necessarily the case. Research is showing that we're much more malleable and flexible and adaptable than we thought earlier on. People like Galton and Binet, the founder of or Binet, the founder of the IQ, they were looking at intelligence and talent and skill as being something that is fixed, and to test people to see where they're at so that they could allocate resources effectively. And so we really hadn't moved away from that until the last 10 or 15 years, and Dweck's work was fundamental in that. And in her research, she identified that if you have an attitude or have a belief, or you recognize that you have the ability to learn something very effectively, or I don't have that yet. I'm not, you don't have the attitude that I'm not a math person, but I'm working at the math, I'm working at that problem, I can get through it. And if I keep on persisting, if I keep on trying, and I work with people and I get the help that I need, I can do it. So it's really about recognizing that our skills and abilities and our talent isn't fixed, but it is dependent upon our ability to work on it and grow. And as a result of that, if you adopt a growth mindset, well, then you're open to criticism, because criticism helps you get better. You recognize that feedback is one of the tools you can use to improve. You recognize you don't have it yet. You're working on it, and you recognize that others who are successful are people that you can emulate, and you look forward to learning from them. Whereas if you've got a fixed mindset, you might be jealous of them. Sometimes with people with a fixed mindset aren't willing to actually try to do something difficult because they think that, well, I've got all these skills and abilities, and if I can't do this one thing right now, well, that just means I'm not talented in that area. I'm not going to bother with that. I'm only going to focus on the things that I'm good at or that I have the ability for. So fixed mindset thinking is very, very limited. It puts students in a position where they run into a plateau. Research is also showing, West research is showing there's a tendency for people to cheat more because their identity is associated with their abilities. And if you have this fixed mindset, then you think that if I'm not good at something, well, that means I'm not a good person. So there's a lot of dynamics involved, and that's why when you look at the literature, and if you look at YouTube and the popular press right now, growth mindset is exploding because it has become the latest movement towards the self-esteem perspective, right? And people are recognizing, yeah, listen, you need to work hard. If you believe, if you really believe and you match that belief with some action, well, then you're going to grow. Yeah, that's true. Having the belief and having some action is important, and you're going to grow. And our students in that initial course, they read all this, they see all the videos, they read Brooks' book, and they're motivated, they're excited. They put the posters up, they have yet plastered all over the walls. So now we're getting to this past week, a couple of days ago. We were talking about the growth mindset, and the students were revisiting this idea. And one student raised her hand. We do this online, so she raised her hand in Adobe Connect, and I said, "Yes, what you've got a question?" And this student, who I've gotten to know over the last little while, and I create a safe environment so students can say what they really believe. She says, Dr. H, I think you're blowing a little bit of smoke. What?
Depends on
She says,
what.
well, no, to be fair, you're giving us a pep rally right now. Or sometimes I feel that your attitude towards the growth mindset is much more of a pep talk than it is based in reality. And I said, well, why is that? She says, well, I read the book and I adopted it and I believed in all those things. And I printed out all the posters. I purchased some posters online. I plastered them up all over my walls. And I went into this 100%. But you know what happened, Dr. H? It didn't take very long for the reality of the classroom to get in the way of the growth mindset. You know, our classroom environments promote the fixed mindset. Everything we do is about standards, it's about competition, it's about testing, it's about seeing, where you rank, all the things that are contrary to the growth mindset. She said, there's a disconnect. I want to do all these things, but the reality of my classroom or the demands by my district, by my school, put me in a position where I have to actually do a lot of the growth or a lot of the fixed mindset stuff. When she said that, a couple other students jumped in and says, yeah, Dr. H, my school is even worse. Nobody is, none of my colleagues are going to go down this growth mindset path because they don't have the time. Everything we do is about test prep to preparing students for these significant exams and ranking students and making sure that, our school is ranked in the proper place. Another student chimed in and says, you know what, Dr. H, I don't think the kids believe in it either. They don't like it. They don't buy it. They're not interested in the growth mindset. All they're interested is doing well on the exam so that they can get the grades they want to get into college.
Mhm.
The parents aren't interested in this either. And the kids aren't interested. How do you get kids to take responsibility for their learning? How do you get kids to believe that they can, develop and through criticism and feedback, formative feedback, how do you get them to believe that they can improve when our whole system forces them into this standards-based testing
Mhm.
environment?
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Before I tell you how I respond. Do you have any thoughts about that? And I know I'm not the only person to experience this because you experienced this. You've done a similar course. So do you want to jump in on this and provide your perspective?
Yeah, when you were talking about the disconnect, I was thinking of an article I just read, and it really discussed the cognitive dissonance for teachers that experience this target on grades, and you got to be the first one to get all the scholarship money in your class. And we live in a system that operates under the fixed mindset notion, but what we want to shift away is to Dweck's idea of using, the growth mindset as a tool for learning and improvement, and being able to help them. There's that one spot that in Texas where that one student gets the Mirabeau scholarship, they're the top of their class. What about all those kids in between? Are we saying that, oh yeah, you're going to get your college page if you get the top, but what about these kids that are innovative and embracing the fringe and that are actually doing different things and are excited about their learning, and want to learn and grow new avenues of thinking? Are we only going to award that one top person to get all the scholarship, all the money and everything to go to college? But my thinking is, taking it back down to that, going to 5302 and reflecting on that experience with them. Immediately after they build that growth mindset plan in that course, they build a learning manifesto. And I see students, really address what they believe about learning and what they're passionate about, and they vacillate between a fixed and a growth mindset. And some of the learning manifesto pieces that they build in the course don't always complement what they started with the growth mindset plan. So what I see happening even between the first 3 weeks of the course is the mindset sort of shifting. And it's really interesting perspective to see that, but it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little time to work through some of those issues, especially with what you're talking about here. We have students who, they see one thing, but we're actually doing another thing in our system. We're promoting grades and promoting top performance, and instead of, the innovative ideas, the fringe-worthy ideas, the new ideas, the avenues of thinking that are exploring and believing beyond what just, getting that A on that test looks like, you know? So I see where they're coming from as a classroom teacher. I've been there. I vacillate too. But go ahead and share your response to the student.
Yeah, before I share the response, I think I just want to confirm something. Yeah, we all do vacillate back and forth from the fixed to the growth mindset. It's just the nature of the way that we are. And I think it's really important for us to recognize that the notion of rewarding the process and rewarding the effort and rewarding the journey as opposed to just focusing on the destination, the grade, is difficult in our system. But it's not impossible to build an environment where that can happen. And so this sort of is a segue into my response. And, I talked about the fact that, you know, John Hattie's research is relatively clear that, just as long as you really aren't purposely harming the students physically, psychologically, mentally, emotionally, you know what, our school systems actually do not a bad job. They're okay. Kids are going to learn, right? So we have a bit of a, you know, we've got a bit of a break there in one sense. Although one student said, well, yeah, but our principal's always saying our grades aren't good enough, and no, we're not good enough. So maybe the system isn't working good enough. Well, if you take a look at the long term, it's not that bad. My point is that um, if we keep on doing the same thing, focusing on the grades, focusing on preparing students to actually do that test, to pass the test, rewarding just the achievement or just the end, we're going to keep on getting what we have.
Right.
Disconnected students, students who don't ask questions, students who go into the workforce, and employers are saying, well, they're not motivated, they're difficult to discipline, they're not responsible, they don't think on their own. There's all these soft skills that the business world is talking about that our students don't have, whether they come out of high school or college or university. There's a lot of soft skills that are missing. Those soft skills are developed through working through real world projects, right? So I was explaining to the class that, you know what, if you start to infuse the growth mindset perspective into what you're doing, and still prepare students for the test, but do so in a different perspective. Incorporate, instead of 20% time focusing on what students want to do in building projects, maybe you do 20 or 30% time focusing on the test, and you do 80 or 70% time focusing on real world projects. Well, guess what? You'll still prepare the students for the test, but by introducing real world projects, by creating that significant learning environment where you give learners choice, ownership, and voice through those authentic learning opportunities, then you're going to get both, because you're still going to prepare them for the test, but you're also going to give students an opportunity to explore, to take ownership, to do something real that and genuine that has the ability to intrinsically motivate them to move forward, where they can then recognize that effort is going to be rewarded, right?
Mhm.
So I introduce the notion that you still need to create that environment. Focus on the test, but do a really good job preparing them for the test, right? Really take a look at the science that's out there. And there are some, there are 5 or 6 or 7 key things you want to do. Get really, really good at preparing the kids for the test, and then take the rest of the time to do, what you want to do. We've talked about this before. We have another video that I should link in the show notes that deals with this. I can't remember the name of the video right now, but I'll add it at the end, unless you can remember it. But so I explained that you want to do that, and get the best of both worlds. And I pointed to an example of one of our earlier DLL graduates who was teaching elementary math, and he adopted the total COVA approach, in the sense that he was doing authentic learning opportunities, and his kids did exceptionally well on their state scores. A couple other students did the same thing. But it's often fear that is holding people back from moving down that path. But I think the other thing that is holding people back is all the videos and all the popular press that's out there. What are your thoughts? I saw the raised hand there. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that you stole my thunder there. I was getting ready to talk about the wall of fear, and that So for example, in our third course 5305, our students come up with an innovation plan, a disruptive innovation plan, if you will. For a lot of folks, this really tests, their ability to kind of stick with it, stick through it, and navigate and build out an innovation plan that is something that might be new to their school, new to their classroom. And folks that kind of have a hard time opening up and developing some sort of innovation plan might be stuck behind that wall of fear. And I always let them know, listen, it's okay. This is a journey. You're not actually getting to one point and you're going to stop. Any route you take along the way is going to help add to your learning experience. If you fail and you feel right on your face, guess what? Take what you learned and use that to develop your next experience, to go along with you as you build out your next innovative idea. We want to help folks that are stuck get unstuck, right? And I think we can do that with the conditions that we've set up in creating significant learning environments in our program. And we have to model that so that our learners as students see that and can take that to their kids as well. It's okay to try something new. It's okay to, fall down from that. It's how you pick up the blocks, how you pick up the pieces and navigate through the obstacle or the task to turn those challenges into opportunities for yourself. If you're always living in that state of fear and you're kind of dammed up behind a wall of fear, it's really difficult to get through that. So you touched on something so important there that I wish I would have known earlier. Telling my own story, I had an absolute fixed mindset growing up about math. And you know how I got that fixed mindset, and this is terrible. It was what we called in Indiana I-STEP scores. And I-STEP was our achievement tests. And every single I-STEP score I took, reading and language was way up here, and math was lower for me. And you know what? I didn't like math. And that's because it was very rote, and it was very, got to solve it's got to be exact, and got to solve the equation, but the equation didn't really apply to anything I cared or knew about. I wasn't passionate about that. And so I built this constant every year that fear of, I don't like math and I'm not good at it, right? So I perpetuate the standardized tests actually fed my fixed mindset. Every year I already had the expectation I was not going to do good at math, right? Now I see this so differently. I'm a researcher. I'm looking to explore and experiment down quant methods. And I realize my own mindset was inhibiting me from taking that leap to the next level of, I can actually do this. I can run the SPSS statistical software. I can audit a few classes and learn a few things. It was me holding myself back. And so when I realized that those tests were feeding my fixed mindset, I go back to that. We really shouldn't be focusing on these tests, because look what it did to me growing up through my years, thinking I couldn't be anything else because I wasn't good at a particular subject area. That's my story, and that is as true as can be. And I want others to not live behind that wall of fear the way I did. because I limited myself. No one else did, right? So it's all about what we believe and what we think about learning and growth. And that's where I think I could have really used a good dose of yet in my formative years.
Well, let me ask something. Who contributed to that fixed mindset? Who were the keys? So were there some key teachers? Was it your parents? Who really helped you to limit yourself? Who were the contributors?
Me, myself, and I,
Okay.
my teachers, and my mom. She was very fixated on, I didn't have a high school diploma, my mom, right? And so she wanted me to do all the things she didn't do, right? And sometimes that negative, I used to do, and this is terrible, but this is so honest. I would take all my bad math scores and throw them down the drain on my way home, on my little papers down the drain. And then she'd say, well, now I'd come home and she'd say, well, Talissa, where are all the bad grades at? And so it was that constant fear that I lived under, that I couldn't do it. And I was getting hit from it, not just at school, but it was at home and it was in my own mind. So when you're getting three of the same messages coming to you, it's like, okay, well then obviously I'm not good at this. And I never thought that I could think outside of what they were telling me. And that's when I did not have that opportunity to really hear my own fixed mindset voice. I didn't understand that at a younger level. But imagine what we could do if we cultivate the conditions to help kids learn to grow that growth mindset and transition into a learner's mindset, that I can do this, that it's my belief that shapes whether or not I take action on what I'm doing and to change that and demonstrating growth in that way. It's my belief on how I can impact my future. I have the choice. I can take ownership of my choices. I have a voice in this. And if I have something authentic to apply this to, I really can change the way I think about something if I just allow myself to do it. Right? And our kids need those models from our teachers to not fixate so much on that test score. I would get what they call the rigorous chills when those test scores would come in, because I knew, I didn't even care at that point. I just had given up. Do we want to perpetuate a classroom full of kids who don't care, or kids who say, you know what, I worked so hard and I learned so much, and you as the teacher prepared me for life, not a test? That's a simple data point. That's my thinking.
Oh, thanks for sharing. That that's that's wonderful that you can reflect on how that fixed mindset impacted you.
Mhm.
But I also want to explore something from your life and from what you've shared with us, and that is, what was the turning point? Where did the shift to the growth mindset start? How did this come about? What was the turning point? What was the key? What are some of the key activities, ideas? How did you develop or how did you move towards the growth mindset?
Well, this might sound strange, but one of the first messages I read was on the bathroom on the back of a bathroom stall in my undergrad years, and it had a brain, and it said, "Do you know your brain is not fully developed until you are 27 years old?" And I thought, gosh, I never considered that. I'm 21 years old or 20 years old, and you mean I have room to grow? Because I'd lived as a product of a system that was so focused on test grades and points, 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 points. That was a big thing, high school and undergrad years points. So I read that, and the next thing that happened, and this is kind of sad, but I lost my father. He passed of a heart attack. And I was reading a book. This was in my undergrad years, so all this is kind of together. And on the back of this bookmark I had found or bought, I don't remember where I acquired it, but it said, "Set your course by the stars and not by the lights of every passing ship." Her name was Gina Putnam. I can't find the author. I've looked everywhere for her, but I read that and it stuck with me. Okay, so does that mean everybody is navigating their own ship? Everybody's going their own way. I can go my way if I just set my own course and do my own thing and navigate my own pathway. Do you mean I can really do this? At 21, that's terrible. 21, I realized, okay, I have the ability to grow and change and be who I want to be and learn what I want to learn and go over humps when there are issues and sticky situations. That's when I learned to hear my fixed mindset. At that time, I had no idea what a growth versus a fixed mindset was, because Dweck's probably been doing research long before I was, even into grade school. So that was it.
Okay, so that's the turning point. And then can you share with us, when did you really start to develop a formal understanding and application of the growth mindset? When did that start to formalize?
Well, before I knew it was a coined term, I realized something. I decided to move to Florida when I was 23. I knew in moving states and not having family or anyone around, I was moving to Florida for school and to get a job, that I was going to come through some challenges I never experienced. I picked degrees that scared me the most. I was no longer going to live behind a wall of fear. When I read that quote, when I read that bathroom sign, when my dad passed away, I realized I need to make every day the best learning experience I could have and make every day count. So when I left and I moved to Florida and I was kind of, for the most part, by myself, I had to navigate my own pathway. And lots of things came at me that were I didn't understand, that I tripped over, that I messed up and I made mistakes on. But you know what? Through that journey, I became the person I became part of the person I am today. It's like, how do I explain it? Every experience molded and shaped who I was. And we can talk about that in another interview, or we can go down that path today. That's really up to you. But I never let any experience pass me without turning it into a learning experience. And I knew I was navigating my pathway on my own. It all goes back to that quote, and I'll never forget that. I am setting my own course. I'm the one that has to be the one that goes through the obstacles and the challenges and pick that up and fail forward. Make sense?
So yeah, it does. So you change your environment. You put yourself in a circumstance where you were required to perpetually learn and perpetually grow. You were challenging yourself by your environment and circumstances that were around you. And so even before you knew what the growth mindset was, you recognized that it was your responsibility. You were embracing the challenges. And even though you're probably still afraid, we all have fears, right? Uh, you know, fear is actually a good thing. It keeps you honest, right? So
Okay.
the fears were there, but you kept on moving forward, kept on creating circumstances. I know your story, but you kept on putting yourself in different environments
Yeah.
where you had the opportunity to grow.
You know,
So it was the environment and the behaviors that you needed to do within that environment that helped your growth mindset really develop. Am I right? Is that the connection?
I have to add something that I just remembered. When I moved to Florida, one of the things I said to myself was, my I lived in outside Chicago, about 20 minutes outside Chicago prior to. My parents picked this place for me. My parents decided where I was going to go to school. My parents said, this is where I'll live and this is how I'll grow and this is what I'll do. And I said that to myself over and over, and I said, I'm an adult now. I'm going to pick my way. I'm going to go where I'm going to see where life lands me. I'm going to navigate that. So when I said that at like 23 or whenever I moved, I was able to take that experience from living in that way where it was very fixed. It was very, this is the way you'll grow up. This is the church you'll go to. This is where you're going to go to school, which actually mimics quite a bit our school system today. This is how you'll learn. This is what you'll need to know. This is the test you'll take. Right? When I broke away from that, I never imagined I would go back to school and get my doctorate degree. I never thought that I would be at Lamar University at this point. I never saw that coming. What I did, though, was work super hard to let things unfold as they may and sort of dictate my future from that point. I let go of that fixed mindset. Here's your education in a bottle, to this is the possibility. This is the landscape. I don't know which star I'm following or where I'm going, but I'll figure it out as I go. And that is the best learning experience for life I could have ever had. It was not a go to fourth grade, take your I-step test in Indiana, and then go into middle school and, pass a few tests and do a few things and go to high school and hopefully you'll graduate with a diploma and all these other. It just wasn't credentialing. It wasn't getting a grade. It wasn't testing. It was life. That's where I learned the most. That's where I learned to have my growth mindset. So I think as, college professors at Lamar University in digital learning and leading, we have to emulate that experience. so that our people, our teachers, our administrators, our ed tech directors, those people can then too set up those conditions for their kids to be in those schools successful. And, you know, why
So,
not? Are we squandering an opportunity if we don't?
so just to confirm and maybe summarize and tease something out here that I think is really important, what you just confirmed or said is that those situations, those environments that you put yourself into, those
Mm-hmm.
authentic real world environments where you had the choice, you took the ownership of your circumstances, your learning environment, and you were dealing with authentic real world challenges and opportunities is what really helped you to grow with the growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just the belief in the quote. The quote got you started. You need that. You have to have that. But it was putting yourself in a situation where you had to actually live it, live in the real world and learn from that authentic learning opportunity. Am I right? Did I?
Yeah, exactly. I had to get
So,
beyond the fear. Going back to
yeah.
that.
So the reason that I want to tease that out and reemphasize that is that in the conversation with my grad students in the class this past week, we talked about that, and I said, listen, if you can go down the path and help your learners embrace the growth mindset while you're preparing them for the tests and all the typical school stuff that we do, they're going to benefit and they're going to grow. But I said, more importantly, if you think about what we do in the DLL program and what we've been advocating, and that is you create a significant learning environment where you give your learners choice, ownership, and voice through those authentic learning opportunities. It's the authentic learning opportunities that will give the learner the intrinsic motivation to take that ownership and to recognize that, you know what? Yeah, I do have to have a belief. I do have to believe that it's a matter of yet. And once I believe that, well, then if I can combine the action to that belief, but that action just can't be a bunch of spinning the wheels. That action has to be related to doing something that's real. That action isn't just memorizing stuff for an exam. No, that action is working on an authentic learning opportunity that will actually make a difference in my life and the lives of others and my community around me.
Mhm.
So the belief combined with action will give you growth if that action is associated with authentic learning opportunities. And this is something I was reinforcing with my students. And then one student says, "Yeah, well, it's great, but our school doesn't allow us." That we kept on going back, but our environment is not about that.
Mhm.
I says, well, guess what? You actually do control what happens when you close the door. You do have a lot of control. Just as long as you're getting the test scores you need, spend your 20, 30% time on the test, you can then integrate authentic learning opportunities in the rest of the time because you really do want to prepare your learners for life, not just for the test. It's really important. So I reiterated that. Then another student says, well, yeah, but Dr. Rapnick, isn't it important for us to actually what about the parents? Isn't it important for us to actually convince the parents that they need to focus on something other than the grades? Because again, in your story, your mom, like my mom, who didn't finish high school, right? I was supposed to get good grades, but I was fortunate in the sense that I was a bad kid who suffered from ADD. So I was always in trouble. Grades were out of the scope. So it didn't really matter. Just keeping me in school was a big enough bonus, and which I didn't. I dropped out of high school when I was young, right? Because I was one of these ADD kids, right? But anyway, so my mom was quite disappointed because she too was into that performance orientation of the fixed mindset because she wanted me to do better than I did, right? So when I explained, when my students were saying, well, how do we get our parents to embrace that growth mindset? And I says, well, you've got to create the environment. You have to create the environment for your children and create the opportunities. Get your parents involved in some of the real world projects,
Mhm.
whether it's a community garden, a farmer's market that comes out of the community garden, whether it is some type of a service learning project where students actually build software to help with animal husbandry in the zoo. I'm referring to one of our students' projects, right? if you've got these real world projects that kids can get involved in, guess what? Their parents will get involved in that as well. They'll see what's going on and they will start to learn about the fact that these real world learning opportunities are motivating their kids in ways that they never could. And they'll start to ask questions and start to recognize. Then you can drop the notion of moving from a fixed mindset, moving away from the emphasis on grades and performance and on measuring yourself to the process, to the journey, to failing and failing forward. Failure
Mhm.
is a good thing because you
Mhm.
learn from failure, right?
Yeah.
Getting parents used to the fact that, well, Johnny got a B at the beginning of the year, but maybe Johnny will get, well, maybe Johnny even got a C. But you know what? If you create the right environment, Johnny can get a B or an A, or Johnny can do whatever he wants, right? And maybe Johnny just isn't interested in certain areas and he might get an A in other areas. And guess what? That's the world that we live in. If you give our learners the choice, they will choose and move in certain directions. But if you prepare them and equip them to embrace real world learning opportunities and recognize that their success is going to be dependent upon their effort, their action, and if they believe that they can do that, but they need to work towards something that's real.
Yeah.
And this is where I think it's important for us to look at the literature.
Mhm.
So there was an article that sort of spawned this whole discussion. I saw this article. Carl Hendricks wrote about the fact. I think the article is called "The Growth Mindset Problem,"
Mhm.
and what he pointed to was research is clear: implementing or using the growth mindset as a treatment or administering the growth mindset does nothing for test scores. It doesn't make a difference. Research shows using the growth mindset as a treatment or just talking about it, just talking about belief and action will equal growth, does nothing. If anything, it almost can be viewed as a noble lie. It's, if anything, it's just like the self-esteem movement. We got into a lot of trouble with that. You know, if Johnny and Susie feel good about themselves, then they're going to be wonderful. Well, actually, it didn't work that way. We have self-entitlement. We have a whole host of problems that have come about because of that. Right? Research is clear that doesn't work. So the author was taking a look at the research and taking a look at what does work, and he made the argument that maybe the problem is that implementing this growth or this growth mindset attitude or perspective in an environment that emphasizes a fixed mindset, grades and competition, and an emphasis on the outcome, you know, the end result, um, is the problem. You can have as much positive attitude towards a growth mindset. You can believe as much as you want. You can spin your wheels as much as you want. But if you don't change the environment, you're not going to go anywhere. And that's what research shows.
The success.
Research is clear on that.
Mhm.
So I'd looked at that a few weeks back, and you and I have been talking about this talk for a while. And then I saw a video the other day, wonderful, cute young girl talking about, if you have the belief and you add the action, well, then the growth will come. And it doesn't matter how cute and how photogenic this wonderful young girl is. If you don't address the environment, it's a noble lie.
Mhm.
If you don't address the environment, if you don't create that significant learning environment where you give your learner choice, ownership, and voice through authentic learning opportunities, the growth mindset really doesn't work. So Hendricks also talked about the fact that he believes that you can't use a growth mindset as an intervention or a treatment. You know, we use the term intervention in school, or treatment, right? Or treatment from a research perspective. You can't use it. It it probably needs to be a philosophy. Well, which means it's probably a value. And we all know that values, philosophies are more often caught than they are taught. They have to be modeled. You have to create the environment, the circumstances, the culture where those values and philosophies can then really manifest themselves and they become part of that culture. So we've got to shift the culture. It goes back to creating that significant learning environment where you give the learner choice, ownership, and voice. Um, when I, you know, reiterated that to the class, I said, you also have to be careful. You have to be careful. As a father who had been experimenting on his boys for many years, my boys are 21 and 22 now, young men. They grew up in that environment where anything is possible, and they have grown into delusional optimists. You know, my older son Levi, his one of his favorite sayings is when he looks at a challenge, he'll go, how hard can that be? You know, he was looking at, buying a rusty old truck, and he thought, man, yeah, great opportunity to learn how to weld. I'll just cut out all the rust and I'll fix it up and I'll learn how to weld while I'm in the process. How hard could that be, Dad? Sometimes there can be a little bit of delusional optimism in this thinking, but at the same time he recognized that he could actually do the work. Once he looked into it, he thought, wow, that's a lot of work, maybe I'll do something else. But that attitude of embracing challenges is manifest in his daily life. I was shuttling him last week, and he's got a diesel truck that we shuttle up and down mountains in. And the reason we got a diesel truck is because of all the work that he does as a professional racer, and you need that type of a vehicle. And coming back from some shuttling, one of the diagnostic tools in his truck indicated that the transmission wasn't working well, and we felt it too. We felt it. We noticed that. So we did a bunch of testing, read some codes, and he did some research, called a couple of people up, and did some. Took a few things apart, replaced a couple of parts, and over a course of 3 or 4 days, he did some maintenance and some service, and he solved the problem. He's not a diesel mechanic. He's not a transmission mechanic, but his attitude is, oh, Dad, how hard can that be? I can get it done. So with that growth mindset, any challenge is just an opportunity to learn. And guess what? He solved the problem in plenty of time. And I got an Instagram message from him when he and his buddy were in Port Angeles, Washington. An 8-hour drive. The truck lasted, it worked wonderfully fine, and he gave me a shot of the truck at the race, and he's racing this weekend with all of the other pros from BC. So, and his truck worked out fine. His attitude is that anything can happen. He can do it. He's in control. My younger son has started a new business, and his business is exploding, and he's embracing it, and he's doing a whole bunch of work, and he's building his business, and he's in one shop, and he's realized that the current location he's at is hindering him because he doesn't have enough space. So he's talking to somebody, and he's looking at leasing a much larger bay with 4 spaces for vehicles. But he also realized he's got to hire a bunch of people, and so he's got to step up his business. He just turned 21 last month. He's a 20-year-old kid. He's a young guy. He's never done this before. But he's recognizing, how hard can that be? I can do this. I can grow. My dad's going to help me. There's other people out there. He's talking to a bunch of people around him. He's seeing other successful people. He's recognizing that their success is something that he can emulate. Other people's success doesn't hinder him. And he recognizes that those people got there. He can get there. He's going to work at it. And he's failing constantly, learning from his failures, but he's constantly moving forward.
Mhm.
And he's about a month or two away from moving into a new shop and taking his business to the other level. And every once in a while I get a conversation, or he says, oh, dad, this is so exciting. This is amazing. My business is going to grow and explode. But Dad, I'm also kind of scared. What if it doesn't work? But you know what? No, I'll make it work. So he goes back and forth from fear, excitement, and he's doing wonderful stuff. Now, obviously you can tell I love my boys. I'm excited for them. Neither one are going to university. I'm an academic. I'm a highly credentialed man. I would love my boys to go to university. Neither one are going to university. Well, not yet. My older son Levi is thinking about that as he's building his racing career, and he's recognizing through injuries that at some point he's going to be a little bit too old and a little bit too hurt. Yeah, maybe then he's going to go to university. But in his preparation, he's starting to see areas that he'd like to learn about. And so as he is building his racing career, he's also looking at the other opportunities that are there. Because with a growth mindset, the whole world is available to you. So when I was encouraging my students of going down this path, I emphasize the fact that it's our responsibility to create that environment, create that significant learning environment where we give our students choice, ownership, and voice through authentic learning opportunities, because we're preparing our kids
Mhm.
for life, not just for the test. And we want them to continue to grow and to continue to flourish. Belief, action to growth, yeah, it's great. But if you don't create that environment, it might not happen. What are your thoughts on this? Have I missed anything, or did we cover it?
I think we've covered it pretty intensely today. I'm really excited where the conversation went. Um, Overall, I just, when you think about, and a question that kind of makes me think of your boys, sometimes, as teachers, we think about what do we want our learners to do? But my question is, let's flip that. Who do our learners want to become? How can we help them get to that point? What can we do to foster the conditions necessary to help them get to that point? And I know the answer. The answer is giving them choice, ownership, and voice in what they're doing, but making sure that it's always applied to an authentic learning opportunity. We have these kids for a year. What part, whenever we're classroom teachers, what part of that year can they take and remember, go back and remember, take with them, so that in in years that they don't have an educator, someone who is, fixated on anything but the test, they can remember that nugget or that morsel of, I can do this, I can be different, I can follow my pathway, follow my dreams, and everything else will come along with it. But it's hard work. It is hard work. It's not the easy route. So overall, I think we've covered everything. Do you have any other final thoughts?
You've just given me one more little idea I want to touch on. And again, that's part of this dialogue, right? We're going back and forth our discussion. Yeah, we have kids for a certain period of time, or we have our students for a certain period of time. In our grad program, I see students for 2, 3, sometimes 4 courses. And so I've got a short period of time that I can pour into these people's lives. And the reason I mention that is a few weeks back, I had an opportunity. I filled in for somebody who was ill, and I did a workshop for somebody over the weekend. And in the workshop, I remember asking the people participating about what do they remember about their most favorite instructor? Doesn't whether they're growing up in primary, secondary. What do you remember about, who was your favorite instructor, and what do you remember about them?
Mm-hmm.
What was it? What was it that made him your favorite instructor? And everybody wrote all this information down and emphasized it. And my phone is ringing. I apologize. I should have turned off earlier. This is candid. This is live. Anyways, the students wrote all the information down, and the common denominator is that their favorite instructor and the instructor who had the biggest impact on their lives was the instructor who believed in them and challenged them and asked them to do something that was significant and trusted them to step up to that challenge. Some of the people talked about the fact that these people did real things, or they had them engage in real things, but there was a common denominator that their favorite instructor was somebody who was real, who
Mm-hmm.
modeled learning,
Mm-hmm.
and who also believed in them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know what? When you believe that it's your responsibility as an instructor to come alongside a learner, as a coach, as a guide, as a mentor, and you create that significant learning environment where you trust your learner enough by giving them the choice, the opportunity, the voice, and have them choose those authentic learning opportunities and go down that path. And then you let them know that they're going to be okay because you're alongside with them. You're coming alongside. You're in their corner. You believe in them. You trust them. You have faith in them. You know that they can do it. Sometimes that little bit of belief and
Makes
that
all.
trust in them
Mhm.
changes everything. That is what I think you need to do as an instructor. And that's our goal. We want to help our learners to embrace learning. And I think we do that by fostering the growth mindset, by creating that significant learning environment, giving them choice, ownership, and voice, authentic learning opportunities, and believing that the learners can do it. I think a little bit of belief goes a long way. So belief, yeah, belief not just by the learner, but by the instructor. The action, yeah, the action is to build that learning environment, give the learner the opportunity to embrace in real world actions. Yeah, if you do that, boy, there's going to be all kinds of growth, good growth. So that's how you foster the growth mindset. You don't intervene, you don't teach it, you live it. you create the circumstances where the learner can live it,
Yeah.
and it'll come about. Final thoughts?
That's some of the most important memories I have of my own instructors is really that little bit of a positive push in terms of I believe in you that caused me to, maybe it wasn't said that way, but it caused me to discover a landscape I thought was undiscoverable, right? And go down that pathway and learn authentically. So, yeah, great session today.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Well, we'll end on that note.
Yep. Thank you.